Standing at my father's graveside, watching the mourners bow their heads in prayer, my stepmother Linda chose that exact moment to walk up wearing a blood-red dress and whisper just loud enough for me to hear, "Finally." But she had no idea what my father had planned for this moment, so make sure you hit that subscribe button, because you won't believe what happens next. I thought I was hallucinating. Grief does strange things to your mind, I told myself. But no, there she was, crimson silk against a sea of black, her lips curved in a smile she didn't bother hiding as she reached out and actually touched my father's casket. Like she owned it. Like she owned him. "Linda," Aunt Carol gasped, staring at the dress. "Red was Brian's favorite color," Linda said smoothly, her voice dripping with false sentiment. "I wanted to honor him." That was a lie. Dad's favorite color was blue. Columbia blue, like the university where he met my mother. I stood there, frozen, my hands clutching the single blue hydrangea I'd brought, Dad's actual favorite flower. Around me, 43 people shifted uncomfortably, unsure where to look. I'd been numb since the call 5 days ago, but now rage began cutting through the fog. Linda wasn't done. She moved closer to the gathered family, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. "It's just so difficult," she said, her voice projecting across the cemetery, "when some people only show up for the reading of the will." Her gaze landed on me like a spotlight. "Brian spent his final years so lonely, you know. Surrounded by people who actually cared, but missing the daughter who couldn't be bothered." My Uncle Mike's hand tightened on my shoulder. "Linda, that's enough." "Is it?" She turned to face the crowd fully, and I saw it then. The barely concealed satisfaction in her expression, the way she stood like she was addressing shareholders, not mourners. "I think the family deserves to know the truth. Brian's estate should go to those who were actually there. Those who didn't abandon him when he needed them most." The whispers started immediately. I felt every eye turn toward me, judging, questioning. And the worst part? I wondered if she was right. I hadn't been there. For 5 years, every call went to voicemail, every visit ended at the door, every letter came back unopened. I thought my father had pushed me away, that he'd decided Linda and her perfect life were enough. But why was she wearing red? Why was she smiling? And why did that whisper finally sound so much like victory? The funeral director cleared his throat, signaling for everyone to take their seats. I moved toward the front row, the chairs reserved for immediate family, but Linda was already there. She'd arranged herself directly in the center, flanked by her sister and brother-in-law, occupying the space like a queen on a throne. There was no room for me. Uncle Mike started to say something, but I shook my head. I couldn't fight her. Not here. Not now. Not with everyone watching and whispering about what kind of daughter abandons her dying father. I took a seat 3 rows back, between strangers in dark suits who'd worked with Dad at Campbell Construction. Men who'd known him for decades, but didn't know me at all anymore. Linda dabbed at her eyes with that tissue again, her performance flawless. She leaned into her sister, whispering loud enough for the first few rows to hear. "I just hope she doesn't make a scene about the will. Brian was very clear about his wishes in the end." My hands clenched around the hydrangea stem so hard I felt it crack. The funeral director introduced the first speaker, Mr. Peterson, Dad's lawyer for over 20 years. I remembered him from childhood, a kind man with silver hair who always kept butterscotch candies in his pocket. He'd been at our house for Sunday dinners back when those still happened, back when Dad was still mine. Mr. Peterson walked to the podium, but instead of opening a eulogy folder, he simply stood there, his hands empty. He cleared his throat once. Twice. The chapel fell silent. "I had prepared remarks," he said, his voice steady and clear. Sterling words about Brian Campbell, a man I was honored to call my friend. But Brian left me with specific instructions regarding this moment. He paused, his eyes moving from Linda to me, then back to the gathered mourners. "Very specific instructions." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Linda's tissues stopped mid-dab. Mr. Peterson reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a cream-colored envelope. Even from 3 rows back, I could see Dad's handwriting scrawled across the front in black ink. My heart lurched. "This envelope," Mr. Peterson continued, holding it up so everyone could see, was given to me 3 months ago with explicit directions. It reads, to be opened at my funeral, in the presence of Linda Campbell and Diana Campbell. He looked directly at me. Diana, would you please come forward? My legs felt like water as I stood. Every eye in that chapel turned to watch me walk down the aisle. I could feel their judgment, their curiosity, their confusion. But I could also feel something else, the weight of Dad's handwriting on that envelope, like he was reaching through death to pull me close. Linda's confident smile had vanished. Her face had gone pale, her perfectly applied makeup suddenly too stark against her skin. This is highly irregular, she said, her voice tight. Surely this can wait until... It cannot, Mr. Peterson interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. These are Brian's wishes. His final wishes. He broke the seal on the envelope with deliberate care, the sound of tearing paper impossibly loud in the frozen silence. Linda's hands gripped the armrests of her chair. For the first time since I'd arrived, I saw something flicker across her face that wasn't satisfaction or performance. It was fear. And in that moment, standing at the front of the chapel with my father's lawyer holding his final words, I realized something. Dad hadn't pushed me away. He hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't stopped loving me. He'd been planning something. The room held its breath as Mr. Peterson unfolded the letter, his eyes scanning the first lines. Then he looked up, his expression grave, and began to read. But before I tell you what that letter said, you need to understand who my father was. Who we were. Because Linda had spent 5 years rewriting our story, and I'd almost started to believe her version. My mother died when I was 7. Ovarian cancer, fast and brutal. One day she was braiding my hair for school, and 6 months later I was standing in another cemetery, holding Dad's hand so tight I thought I might break his fingers. He was 32 years old, suddenly a widower with a second grader and a construction company that was barely breaking even. He could have sent me to my grandparents. Aunt Carol offered to take me for a year until you get back on your feet, Brian. But Dad knelt down in our kitchen the day after the funeral, still wearing his suit from the service, and said, "It's you and me now, Brookie. We're going to be okay. I promise." And somehow we were. Saturday mornings became our time. While other kids watched cartoons, I'd be at whatever construction site Dad was working on, wearing a hard hat 3 sizes too big and carrying a clipboard like I was important. He'd spread the blueprints across a makeshift table, usually plywood balanced on sawhorses, and show me how a bunch of lines and numbers became someone's dream home. "See this wall here," he'd say, tapping the paper with his pencil. "Load-bearing. You can't just knock it down because you want a bigger kitchen. The whole house depends on it knowing its job." He'd look at me then, making sure I understood he wasn't just talking about walls. "Some things hold everything else up, Diana. You have to know what matters." I was 12 when he first said it. "Campbell Construction will be yours someday, sweetheart. You've got the mind for it. Not if you want it, or maybe." Just a simple statement of fact, like saying the sun would rise tomorrow. I carried that promise through middle school, high school, even into college. But somewhere along the way, I realized I didn't want to build houses. I wanted to understand people. The psychology program at State accepted me with a full scholarship, and I spent an entire weekend terrified to tell Dad I wasn't going to study business. We were having our Sunday dinner, our ritual, just the two of us at the kitchen table, Chinese takeout containers spread between us like we were planning a feast. I'd been pushing lo mein around my plate for 10 minutes before I finally said it. "Dad, I got into the psychology program." He looked up from his kung pao chicken, chopsticks paused midair. "That's wonderful, honey. When do you start?" I stared at my plate. "I know you wanted me to take over the company. I know I was supposed to study business. Diana." He set down his chopsticks and reached across the table to take my hand. "Look at me." I did, expecting disappointment. Instead, he was smiling. "You'll run it your way, with your heart. That's what Campbell Construction needs. Not another builder, we can hire those. It needs someone who understands that we're not just constructing buildings. We're building homes for families. You're going to bring something to this company I never could." "You mean that?" My voice cracked. Every word. He squeezed my hand. "That's what it means to be my daughter. You find your own path, and I walk beside you every step of the way. Those Sunday dinners became sacred. No matter how busy we got, me with classes and internships, him with the business expanding from 3 crews to 12, we protected that time. We'd sit at that same kitchen table, eating whatever takeout we'd grabbed, and talk about everything. My cases from the clinic. His problem employees. My dating disasters. His frustrations with city permits. Life, unfiltered and honest. The last Sunday dinner we had was 7 years ago. I just graduated with my master's degree. Dad had brought champagne, the cheap kind from the grocery store, because neither of us knew anything about wine, and we'd toasted to the future. To Dr. Campbell, he'd said, grinning so wide his eyes crinkled. To Campbell Construction, I'd countered. And to us. Always to us, Brookie. You and me. That's what matters. 3 months later, he brought Linda home for the first time, and everything began to change. I was in my second year of grad school, buried in research papers and clinical hours, when Dad called me on a Tuesday, not our usual Sunday, and asked if I could come to dinner that weekend. There's someone I want you to meet, he'd said, and I could hear the nervousness in his voice. My father, who'd faced down building inspectors and bank loan officers without flinching, was nervous about introducing me to a woman. Linda Marshall arrived wearing cream-colored silk and pearls, carrying a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my textbooks. She owned an art gallery in the city, the kind with a single sculpture in the window and prices you had to ask about. She was elegant in a way that made our kitchen table with its mismatched chairs seem shabby, but she smiled like she thought it was charming. Diana, she'd said, taking both my hands in hers. Your father talks about you constantly. The brilliant psychologist in training. I've been dying to meet the woman who has Brian Campbell wrapped around her little finger. I'd laughed, charmed despite myself. She asked thoughtful questions about my research. She complimented the Thai food I'd picked up. She touched Dad's arm when he talked and looked at him like he'd hung the moon. By the end of the night, I was thinking maybe this was good. Maybe Dad deserved someone who looked at him that way. She's wonderful, Dad, I told him when Linda excused herself to the bathroom. You think so? He looked almost boyish in his relief. Because you're the most important person in my life, Brookie. If you're not comfortable. I'm comfortable, I'd said. You deserve to be happy. I meant it. God help me, I really meant it. The changes started small. A month after that first dinner, I called Dad on our usual Sunday to confirm what takeout we were getting, and he sounded distracted. Actually, honey, Linda and I have reservations tonight. Can we do next Sunday? Of course, I'd said, ignoring the small twist in my stomach. Next Sunday became the Sunday after. Then it became every other Sunday. Then once a month if Linda didn't have an exhibition opening or a charity gala that Dad needed to attend. You understand, don't you, Diana? Linda would say, her smile apologetic. Your father works so hard. He needs time to relax, not constantly worry about. She'd caught herself. Not that you're a worry, of course. Just that he tends to stress about you being alone, working too hard. You know how fathers are. She started managing his calendar. I'd call to visit and Linda would answer. She'd moved in after 6 months. Just makes sense at our age, dear, and inform me that Dad was at a site inspection, or meeting with investors, or taking a much-needed nap. His blood pressure, you know. The doctor says he needs to reduce stress. I didn't know Dad was having blood pressure issues. He hadn't told me. Maybe I should come by later? I'd suggest. Oh, we have the Hendersons coming for dinner tonight. And tomorrow we're driving to the coast for the weekend. Perhaps next week. But next week, there was always something else. My calls started going to voicemail. When Dad did call back, Linda was often in the background. I could hear her, though she was trying to be quiet. Tell her you love her, Brian. But we really do need to leave for the reservation. The comments got sharper, wrapped in concern like razor blades in silk. Diana, sweetheart, your father mentioned you've been calling a lot. Is everything okay? You're not having problems you need to burden him with, are you? Only his heart. His heart. I'd repeated, ice flooding my veins. What's wrong with his heart? Oh, nothing serious. Just some irregularity. The cardiologist wants him calm. I'm sure you understand all that drama from your work, those troubled children you counsel. It's heavy stuff. Maybe save the difficult conversations for your supervisor. I'd started censoring myself, keeping things light. Not wanting to be the daughter who stressed out her father's heart. Not wanting Linda to look at me with that patient, pitying expression that said I was being needy, difficult, too much. I showed up unannounced one Saturday, our old ritual day, thinking I'd surprise Dad at a job site like old times. Linda answered the door of the house I'd grown up in, wearing a red silk robe, her expression cool. Diana. How unexpected. She didn't move to let me in. Is Dad here? I thought we could grab breakfast. He's in the shower. We had rather a late night. Her smile was knowing, uncomfortable. And actually, we're heading out of town this afternoon. New gallery opening in Portland. Didn't he tell you? No, You know how scattered he's been lately. The medication makes him foggy. I really do think you should call before just showing up, dear. Your father needs his peace. She closed the door before I could respond, and I stood on the porch of my childhood home, locked out, wondering when I'd become a visitor who needed permission. The breaking point came on my 25th birthday. Dad had never, not once in 25 years, forgotten to call me first thing in the morning. Even when I was studying abroad in college, even when he was 3 states away at a conference, he'd always found a way. It was our thing. 7 a.m., like clockwork, his voice singing an off-key version of Happy Birthday. That morning, my phone stayed silent. By noon, I'd convinced myself he was planning a surprise. By 3 p.m., I was worried something had happened. By 6 p.m., I was driving to the house, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Linda answered the door in yoga pants and a cashmere sweater, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked surprised to see me, which should have been my first clue. Diana. Is something wrong? Is Dad here? He didn't call, and I just wanted to make sure. Oh, honey. Her face arranged itself into sympathetic concern. He's sleeping. He's been so tired lately. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. Between you and me, I think he's still disappointed about last month. You know how sensitive he can be. My stomach dropped. Last month. His birthday? When you forgot. She tilted her head, studying me. He tried not to show it, but I could tell he was hurt. He kept checking his phone all day, waiting for your call. I didn't forget, I said, my voice rising. I sent a gift. I left 3 voicemails. Diana. Dad's voice came from behind Linda, rough with sleep. Or something else. He appeared in the hallway, wearing the reading glasses I'd given him 2 Christmases ago, looking older than I remembered. Smaller, somehow. What are you doing here? It's my birthday, Dad. You always call. Your birthday. He said it flat, emotionless, like he was reading a grocery list. Right. Brian, why don't you go back to rest? Linda touched his arm, but he shook her off. No, if Diana drove all the way out here, she must want something. His eyes met mine, and they were cold. So cold. What is it this time? Money? Hoping I'll invest in some new therapy practice? Or did you just remember you had a father when it was convenient? I felt like he'd slapped me. Dad, what are you? You forgot my birthday last month. You haven't visited in what, for months? 5? But now, on your birthday, suddenly you remember where I live. He crossed his arms. I raised you better than this, Diana. I thought I taught you that family means showing up, not just when you need something. I've been trying to show up, I said, tears streaming down my face now. I call, I visit, but you're always busy or gone or... That's not true. Linda's voice was soft, devastating. Diana, honey, I think maybe you need to talk to someone. Your father has been here. You're the one who's been too busy with your career. I sent gifts. I left messages. But looking at Dad's face, cold and certain, I realized he believed her. He actually believed I'd abandoned him. Dad, please. Something's wrong. This isn't. What's wrong is that I spent 23 years putting you first, and now that I've finally found someone who actually wants to spend time with me, you can't handle it. He turned away. Linda's right. I need to rest. You should go. Dad. Go, Diana. I drove home sobbing so hard I had to pull over twice. When I got to my apartment, there was a package on my doorstep. The gifts I'd sent for his birthday returned unopened. The card I'd written, to the best dad in the world, thank you for always believing in me, had been torn in half. After that, I stopped trying so hard. What was the point? Every call went to voicemail. Every letter came back marked return to sender. I ran into Mr. Peterson at a coffee shop once, and he looked uncomfortable when I asked about Dad. He seems happy, Diana. Maybe just give him some space. Uncle Mike said Dad had told him I was too wrapped up in my career to bother with family anymore. Aunt Carol stopped inviting me to holidays because it's just awkward, honey, when Brian says you won't come anyway. I started believing it. Maybe I had been a terrible daughter. Maybe I'd taken him for granted during those Sunday dinners, assumed he'd always be there waiting. Maybe Linda was right, and I only showed up when I needed something. The doubt ate at me like poison, corroding every good memory until I couldn't tell truth from fiction anymore. I'd lie awake at night, replaying every conversation, every missed call, every time I'd been too busy with a patient to pick up immediately. Had I driven him away? Had I failed the one person who'd never failed me? The worst part was the silence. Not hearing his voice. Not knowing if he thought about me at all. Wondering if he'd replaced me entirely with Linda and her perfect, undemanding presence. I tried one last time, about 2 years ago. I wrote him a letter, an actual handwritten letter on real paper, telling him I loved him, that I didn't understand what had happened, but I wanted to fix it, that I missed our Sunday dinners and his terrible jokes and just him. I mailed it certified, requiring a signature, so I'd know he got it. 3 weeks later, it came back. Returned to sender. Refused. That's when I stopped trying. That's when I let myself believe that I'd lost him, and it was somehow, impossibly, my fault. Until 5 days ago, when Uncle Mike called to tell me Dad was dead, and I realized I'd never get the chance to understand what I'd done wrong. But now, standing at the front of that chapel with Mr. Peterson holding Dad's letter, I was about to learn the truth. Mr. Peterson's voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly as he read. This letter is dated 3 months before Brian's death. It begins, "To my family, friends, and especially to my daughter Diana. If you're hearing this, then Linda succeeded in one thing. She killed me." The chapel exploded. Gasps, shouts, someone screamed. I stood frozen, my brain unable to process the words. Killed him. Killed him. Linda succeeded in killing him. Linda shot to her feet, her face drained of color, the red dress suddenly garish against her pale skin. This is insane. This is a sick joke. Brian wasn't in his right mind at the end. Everyone knows the medication. Sit down, Mrs. Campbell. Mr. Peterson's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Or I'll have security remove you. Brian was of perfectly sound mind when he wrote this, as multiple medical professionals will attest. And he knew you'd say exactly that. Linda's mouth opened and closed, but she slowly sank back into her seat. Her sister grabbed her hand, but Linda shook her off. Mr. Peterson continued reading. But she failed in everything else. She failed to break my daughter's spirit. She failed to make Diana believe she was unloved. And most importantly, she failed to get away with it. He looked up at the crowd. Brian continues, "For the past 5 years, Linda has systematically destroyed my relationship with my daughter. She blocked Diana's phone number on my cell phone. She intercepted and returned every letter, every gift, every card Diana sent. She sent emails from my account, emails I never wrote, telling Diana to leave me alone." That's not Linda started, but Mr. Peterson held up his hand. "I have documentation." He pulled a thick folder from his briefcase and held it up. Phone records showing that Diana Campbell's number was blocked on Brian's cell phone, a block that Brian himself removed 3 months ago when he discovered it. Here are the returned packages, all bearing Linda's handwriting on the return labels. Here are the emails, traced to Linda's laptop, not Brian's. He projected images onto the screen behind him, my handwriting on envelopes, the tracking numbers I'd obsessively checked, emails I'd never received that appeared to be from Dad, telling me to stop bothering him, that he'd moved on. That I was just like my mother, selfish and needy. I felt my knees give out. Uncle Mike caught me, held me up. But there's more. Mr. Peterson pressed a button on his laptop. 3 months ago, when Brian discovered what Linda had been doing, he installed security cameras. Hidden ones. This footage is from Diana's birthday, 2 months ago. The The screen flickered to life. There was our front door. There was me, younger, hopeful, holding a wrapped present and a homemade birthday cake. I watched myself knock. Wait. Knock again. Then Linda appeared in the frame, opening the door just a crack. I couldn't hear what we were saying, but I could see my face fall, see me pointing to the cake. Linda shook her head, her expression sympathetic. She glanced behind her, toward where Dad must have been, then back to me. She mouthed something that looked like, "I'm sorry," and closed the door. On screen, I stood there for a full minute before turning away, leaving the cake on the porch. "The audio," Mr. Peterson said quietly, and suddenly I could hear it. My voice, tinny through the camera's microphone, "I just want to say happy birthday." I brought his favorite cake. Linda's voice, syrupy with false concern, "Oh, Diana, honey, he's not here. He and I went to the coast for the weekend." "Didn't he tell you?" "He must have forgotten to mention it." But then the camera angle switched to an interior camera I hadn't known was there. Dad was sitting in his recliner, 15 feet from the door, a book in his lap. He looked up when the doorbell rang, started to stand. Linda had put her hand on his shoulder, pushed him gently back down. "Just a solicitor, honey. I'll handle it." On screen, Dad had settled back, trusting her. While I stood on the porch, believing he wasn't home. Believing he'd forgotten my birthday. Believing he'd chosen the coast with her over me. The chapel was dead silent except for the sound of my ragged breathing. "There are 47 more videos," Mr. Peterson said, his voice thick with emotion. 47 times Diana came to visit. 47 times Linda turned her away, lying about Brian's whereabouts. Lying to both of them. I looked at Linda. She was gripping the armrests of her chair so hard her knuckles had gone white. Her carefully constructed mask had shattered completely. What was left was raw panic. "You kept him from me," I whispered. "For 5 years, you kept him from me." "Diana," she started. "And you made me think it was my fault." Mr. Peterson's voice cut through the stunned silence. But the isolation was only part of Linda's plan. He turned to a new page in Dad's letter, and I saw his jaw tighten. 3 months ago, Brian collapsed at a construction site. His crew rushed him to Memorial Hospital, where doctors ran extensive tests. They found toxic levels of digitalis in his bloodstream. My breath stopped. Digitalis. Dad's heart medication. Brian took digitalis for an arrhythmia, Mr. Peterson continued. 0.125 milligrams once daily. The levels in his blood indicated he'd been ingesting nearly 10 times that amount. For months. Maybe years. The chapel was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The doctors told Brian that if he'd arrived 30 minutes later, he would have died. They told him someone was poisoning him. And Brian, Mr. Peterson's voice cracked. Brian immediately knew who. Linda was shaking her head, her lips moving silently, but no sound came out. Brian writes, "I wanted to believe I was wrong. God, how I wanted to be wrong. So I went home, and I installed cameras. Hidden ones, throughout the house. In the kitchen. In my office. In our bedroom." Mr. Peterson looked at Linda with unconcealed disgust. "What those cameras captured is now evidence in an active murder investigation." He pressed play on his laptop again. The screen showed our kitchen, Dad's kitchen, early morning light streaming through the windows. The timestamp read 6:47 a.m., 2.5 months ago. Linda entered the frame wearing a silk robe, yawning. She went to the coffee maker, poured 2 cups. Then she reached into the pocket of her robe and pulled out a pill bottle. Dad's pill bottle. I could see the label from here. Digitalis, 0.125 milligrams. She looked around, actually looked around, like she was checking for witnesses in her own home. Then she opened the bottle, shook out pills. Not 1, 5, 6, 7 pills into her palm. The camera captured everything in horrible detail as she crushed them with the back of a spoon against the counter, ground them into fine powder, and stirred the powder into one of the coffee cups. She hummed while she did it. Actually hummed, like she was preparing breakfast, not murder. "Oh my God," Aunt Carol breathed behind me. The video changed. Evening now. Dad sat in his recliner, reading. Linda brought him his nightly whiskey, kissed the top of his head. The camera had a clear view of the kitchen counter where she'd prepared it. The same crushing motion. The same careful stirring. The same casual humming. Another clip. Linda preparing Dad's dinner plate, adding powder from crushed pills to his mashed potatoes while hers remained untouched. "Stop it," Linda whispered, but no one was listening to her anymore. "Brian's letter explains the motive," Mr. Peterson said, pausing the video on a free frame of Linda's face, calm, focused, methodical. "He writes, I was a fool. Linda never loved me. She loved Campbell Construction. The business, the money, the properties. She loved what I'd built. When we got married, I told her I will left everything to Diana, the company, the house, all of it. I saw something flicker in her eyes that day, but I dismissed it. I thought I was being paranoid." Mr. Peterson looked up at the crowd. But Brian wasn't paranoid. For the past 5 years, Linda began isolating Diana, manufacturing an estrangement. Brian writes, "She was clever. So clever. If I died and Diana suddenly had no relationship with me, it wouldn't look suspicious. It would look like a daughter who'd abandoned her father was getting what she deserved, nothing. Or if I changed my will, everyone would understand why. The absent daughter versus the devoted wife who nursed me through my illness." The timeline clicked into place in my mind with horrible clarity. Linda hadn't just wanted Dad dead. She'd wanted me erased first. Discredited. Turned into the villain so that when Dad died, no one would question her inheriting everything. Linda's plan was meticulous, Mr. Peterson continued. Destroy the father-daughter relationship. Poison Brian slowly, making his death look like natural heart failure, tragic, but unsurprising for a man with heart problems. Play the grieving widow. Contest any will that left assets to the absent daughter. Inherit Campbell Construction and everything Brian had built. He closed the folder with a sharp snap. She almost succeeded. The poisoning was working. Brian's heart was failing. The doctors said he had perhaps 6 months to live, even with treatment. But she made one critical mistake. What mistake? Uncle Mike asked, his voice hard. Mr. Peterson looked at Linda, who had gone absolutely still, her face a wax mask of terror. She didn't count on Brian surviving that collapse long enough to discover the truth. She didn't count on him having 3 months to document everything. And she didn't count on him loving his daughter enough to spend his dying days setting a trap. The red dress suddenly made perfect sense. Linda had thought she'd won. She'd come to Dad's funeral in red because she was celebrating. She'd whispered, finally, because she believed she'd gotten away with murder. But she'd walked straight into the trap my father had built with his last breaths. Mr. Peterson turned to the final pages of Dad's letter, and his voice softened. Brian writes, "The day I got out of the hospital, I went straight to the police. I had the medical reports, the toxicology results, my suspicions. I thought they'd arrest Linda immediately. Instead, Detective Sarah Chen sat me down and explained that suspicion isn't proof. Linda was careful, charming, respected in the community. She had alibis, explanations. The pills were in our shared bathroom. I could have accidentally overdosed myself. Without concrete evidence, a good defense attorney would destroy the case." I watched Linda's face. She was barely breathing, her eyes fixed on Mr. Peterson, like he was holding her life in his hands. Which I realized he was. "So I became a ghost in my own life," Mr. Peterson read. "I installed cameras everywhere. I documented every pill she crushed, every cup of coffee she poisoned, every lie she told. I pretended I suspected nothing. I took my medication, the correct dosage, in secret. I dumped out the poison coffee when she wasn't looking. I fed poison food to the disposal. And I slowly, carefully, gathered everything the police would need to ensure she'd never walk free. 3 months. Dad had spent 3 months living with his would-be murderer, pretending to trust her, pretending to love her, all while she tried to kill him every single day. The courage that must have taken. The fear. But the hardest part, Mr. Peterson continued, his voice breaking, Brian writes, the hardest part was not contacting Diana. God, I wanted to. Every time I saw her number blocked on my phone, every time I found another return letter, I wanted to call her, tell her everything. But Detective Chin was clear: if Linda suspected I knew, she'd destroy the evidence. She'd flee. Or worse, she'd accelerate her plan and I'd be dead before we could build the case. I had to let Diana believe I didn't love her. I had to let her think I'd chosen Linda over her. And that broke my heart worse than any poison ever could. Tears were streaming down my face. All those nights I'd lain awake, hating myself, thinking I'd failed him. And he'd been protecting me, fighting for me, dying and still putting me first. 3 weeks ago, Mr. Peterson said, Brian finalized a new will. Everything, Campbell Construction, the house, his investments, every asset, goes to Diana Campbell. The prenuptial agreement Linda signed gives her nothing in the event of marital misconduct, which attempted murder certainly qualifies as. This will has been filed with 3 separate law firms, notarized by 2 judges, and copies provided to the district attorney's office. Linda made it sound like a wounded animal. Brian also left a specific instruction regarding his funeral. Mr. Peterson's eyes found Linda, cold and unflinching. He writes, 2 weeks ago, I overheard Linda on the phone with someone I never found out who. She was laughing, actually laughing, and she said, I'll wear red to his funeral. Red, to celebrate finally being free of the Campbell burden. I'll cry for the cameras, cash the life insurance check, and be in the Bahamas by Christmas. The crowd turned to stare at Linda, at her blood-red dress, and the disgust on their faces was palpable. When I heard that, Mr. Peterson read, I knew exactly how this had to end. Detective Chin agreed. So I made a plan for my funeral. I knew Linda would come. I knew she'd wear that red dress, because she's too arrogant to help herself. I knew she'd want Diana to feel small and guilty and alone. And I needed my daughter to see the truth. To know she was loved. To watch Linda face justice. Mr. Peterson looked directly at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. Diana, sweetheart, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't fight my way back to you in person. I'm sorry for every moment you believed you'd lost me. But I need you to know you never lost me. Not for 1 second. Every day I woke up, I fought for you. Every pill I didn't take, every camera I installed, every piece of evidence I gathered, it was all for you. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Could barely stand. Linda wanted you to feel guilty and alone at my funeral. Instead, I wanted you to watch her be arrested. I wanted you to inherit everything I built, knowing that you were my choice, my priority, my daughter. Always. This is the only way I could protect you, Brookie. The only way I could make sure she never hurt you again. I love you. I'm so proud of you. And I'm sorry I had to leave you to do this. But you were worth fighting for. You were worth everything. Love, Dad. The chapel was silent except for the sound of people crying. I looked at Linda, and she was staring at me with pure hatred now, the mask completely gone. Mr. Peterson, I managed to whisper. Are the police? He nodded toward the back of the chapel. They've been here the whole time. 2 people stood up from the last row, a man and woman in dark suits that I'd assumed were business associates. But now I saw the badges clipped to their belts, the way they moved with purpose down the aisle, their eyes locked on Linda. Linda Marshall Campbell, the woman said, her voice carrying through the chapel with absolute authority. I'm Detective Sarah Chen. This is Detective Marcus Rodriguez. We need you to come with us. For a moment, Linda just sat there, frozen. Then something snapped. She bolted. The red dress made her impossible to miss as she ran down the aisle, her heels clicking frantically against the marble floor. She shoved past Uncle Mike, past Aunt Carol, heading for the chapel doors like a woman possessed. But Detective Rodriguez was faster. He caught her at the entrance, one hand on her arm, the other reaching for his handcuffs. No, Linda screamed, struggling against his grip. This is insane. I would never. You have the right to remain silent, Detective Chen said calmly, joining her partner. I suggest you use it. But Linda wasn't listening. She was staring back at me, her face contorted with rage and something that looked like genuine shock. Like she couldn't believe her perfect plan had fallen apart. This is her doing. Diana poisoned his mind against me. She's the ungrateful bitch who abandoned him, who broke his heart. Ma'am, you need to stop talking. Detective Rodriguez had the handcuffs on now, and Linda was still thrashing, her carefully styled hair coming loose, her makeup smearing. He loved me. He chose me. That little brat couldn't handle that daddy found someone better. Linda Marshall Campbell, Detective Chin interrupted, her voice hard. You're under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, forgery, identity theft, and harassment. Your husband, Brian Campbell, survived long enough after his heart attack to give a formal statement to police, detailing your attempts on his life. His death is now being investigated as a homicide. The word homicide echoed through the chapel like a gunshot. Linda stopped struggling. Her face went slack, all the fight draining out of her as the reality sank in. Not attempted murder anymore. Murder. Because Dad was dead and she'd killed him, even if it had taken months. Brian gave a statement, she whispered. A detailed one, Detective Chin confirmed. Including a video recording. We have everything, Mrs. Campbell. The medical records, the toxicology reports, the security footage, the documentation of your systematic isolation of his daughter. We've been building this case for 3 months. Brian Campbell made sure we had everything we needed to convict you. They started leading her toward the doors. Linda twisted back one more time, her eyes finding mine, and I saw it finally, not the charming gallery owner, not the devoted wife, but the woman who'd spent 5 years destroying my life and trying to murder my father. You don't deserve Campbell Construction, she hissed. You don't deserve any of it. I earned it. I spent 7 years playing the perfect wife to that sentimental fool. That's enough. Detective Rodriguez pulled her through the doors, and then she was gone, her voice fading as they walked her to the police car waiting outside. The chapel doors closed, and silence fell like a blanket of snow. I stood there, shaking, unable to process what had just happened. Around me, people were crying, whispering, hugging each other. But I felt separate from it all, like I was watching from underwater. Then Uncle Mike was there, his arms around me, and I collapsed against him. I'm so sorry, he kept saying, his voice rough with tears. Diana, I'm so sorry. I should have known. I should have questioned why you stopped coming around. I should have. You believed him, I managed. We all did. That's what she wanted. Aunt Carol joined us, then Mr. Peterson, then others, cousins I hadn't seen in years, Dad's business partners, people from the construction crews. They surrounded me, this wall of support I'd thought I'd lost. Your father, Mr. Peterson said, his hand on my shoulder, spent his last 3 months making sure you'd be protected. Making sure Linda would face justice. Making sure you'd know the truth. His voice broke. He died knowing he'd succeeded. Knowing you'd be okay. I looked at Dad's casket, still draped in flowers at the front of the chapel. He'd orchestrated all of this from beyond the grave. He'd turned his own funeral into Linda's reckoning. Even dying, even poisoned and betrayed, he'd been protecting me. I never got to say goodbye, I whispered. He knew, Diana. Uncle Mike squeezed my hand. He knew you loved him. That's why he fought so hard. And standing there, surrounded by family, watching the police car drive away with the woman who'd tried to destroy us both, I finally understood. Dad's last gift wasn't the company or the house or the inheritance. It was the truth. It was justice. It was making sure I knew I'd never been unloved, never been abandoned, never been forgotten. Even in death, he'd been fighting for me. 1 week later, I sat in my father's office at Campbell Construction headquarters for the first time in 7 years. The leather chair still smelled like his cologne. His coffee mug, world's best dad, a gift from me when I was 12, still sat on the desk, a ring of dried coffee staining the bottom. Mr. Peterson sat across from me, another envelope in his hands. This one's private, he said gently. Just for you. Brian gave it to me the day before he died. My hands trembled as I opened it. Dad's handwriting filled 3 pages, and I could barely see through my tears as I read. My dearest Diana, if you're reading this, then you know the truth. You know what Linda did, what I had to do, and why I couldn't reach out to you. I hope you can forgive me for those 3 months of silence. Every day, I wanted to call you. Every time I found another blocked message, another return letter, I wanted to break down your door and tell you everything. but I couldn't risk it. If Linda suspected I knew, she'd have destroyed the evidence or disappeared. Or worse, she'd have accelerated her plan, and I'd be dead before the police had what they needed. So I chose justice over comfort. I chose protecting you over holding you one last time. I need you to know something, sweetheart. Watching you become a psychologist, watching you choose to help people heal instead of following my path, that was the proudest moment of my life. Not because you took over the company, though I always knew you would, eventually, but because you had the courage to forge your own way. That's who you are. That's who you've always been. Campbell Construction is yours now. All of it. Not because you're obligated to take it, but because you earned it. You earned it by being the kind of person who sees people, really sees them. Who understands that we're not just building structures, we're building homes, lives, futures. You'll make this company something I never could have imagined, and I can't wait to watch from wherever I end up. I love you, Brookie. I'm sorry I had to leave you to do this. But you were worth fighting for. You were worth everything. Love always, Dad. I folded the letter carefully and pressed it against my heart. Then Mr. Peterson handed me a flash drive. There's one more thing. Brian recorded this in his hospital room, 2 days before he died. He wanted you to watch it here, in the office. I plugged the drive into Dad's computer with shaking hands. The screen flickered to life, and there he was. Thinner than I remembered, the hospital gown visible at his collar, but his eyes were clear and bright. He was smiling. Sweetheart, his voice filled the office, and I started sobbing immediately. If you're watching this, I'm gone. But Linda didn't win. Look around you, you're standing in our office, where you belong. You're home. He wiped at his own eyes, his smile wavering. I'm sorry I couldn't hug you one last time. God, I'm so sorry. I wanted to. I wanted to tell you everything, to explain, to hold you and promise it would all be okay. But I had to settle for this. For making sure she couldn't hurt you anymore. His hand pressed against the camera, like he was trying to reach through the screen. I need you to know this, Diana. Not a day went by that I didn't fight to get back to you. Every morning I woke up and that woman tried to kill me, I thought of you. I thought of Sunday dinners and construction sites and the future we planned. That woman took my life, but she couldn't take my love for you. She couldn't take away what we built together. He leaned back, exhausted but determined. Build something beautiful, Diana. Make Campbell Construction into what we dreamed, a place that builds homes and heals hearts. Bring your psychology training into it. Change the industry. Make it better. I know you will because that's who you are. You make everything better just by being you. His voice cracked. I'm so proud of you, Daddy's girl. I'm watching from somewhere, I promise. And I'm so proud. I love you. Forever. The screen went black. I sat there in Dad's chair, crying until I couldn't cry anymore. Then I looked around the office at the blueprints on the walls, the photos of completed projects, the picture of me at 8 years old wearing an oversized hard hat. This was mine now. Not because Linda failed to steal it, but because Dad had fought to give it to me. I opened my laptop and started making notes. Campbell Construction would become something new. We'd implement mental health programs for our crews. We'd create resources for families dealing with domestic manipulation. We'd build homes and heal hearts, just like Dad said. 6 months later, I stood in a courtroom and watched Linda be sentenced to 25 years to life for murder, attempted murder, fraud, and a dozen other charges. She never looked at me. Not once. I didn't care. She'd already lost. Campbell Construction was thriving under my leadership. I'd hired 3 new psychologists to work with our crews, addressing the stress and trauma that came with hard physical labor. Worker satisfaction was up 30%. Retention was the highest it had ever been. I'd also established the Brian Campbell Foundation, dedicated to helping families recognize and escape domestic manipulation. We trained social workers, funded legal aid, created resources for people who thought they were going crazy when really they were being gaslit. Dad's story, our story, was helping people. Today, I stood at his grave for the first time since the funeral. The headstone had been installed last week, simple gray granite with words I'd chosen carefully. Brian Campbell, beloved father, love means fighting battles no one else can see. I knelt down and placed a bouquet of blue hydrangeas against the stone. Dad's favorite. Not red. Never red again. You fought for me when I didn't even know I needed fighting for, I said softly. That's love, Dad. Real love. And I get it now. I understand why you couldn't tell me, why you had to stay silent. You were protecting me the only way you could. A breeze rustled through the cemetery, warm and gentle. I'm going to make you proud, I promised. Campbell Construction is becoming everything we dreamed. We're building homes and healing hearts. We're changing lives. And every day, I think about what you taught me, that family isn't just blood. It's choice. It's showing up. It's fighting, even when no one knows you're fighting. I stood up, brushing grass from my knees. The company truck was parked nearby, Campbell Construction, emblazoned on the side in Dad's original logo. My truck now. My company. My legacy to build. As I walked back to it, I thought about that funeral, about Linda in her red dress whispering finally like she'd won. She'd worn red to celebrate an ending. But I wore blue to honor a love that never died. And in the end, love had won.